Amalia Eon Karis.
This is Satya, and you're listening to
Love, Sex, and the Hidden Agenda. Our podcast was created with the sole intention to release toxic shame, illuminate our shadow nature, and expose the mysterious entities that feed off our most precious life force, our sexual energy. To learn more about our life-enhancing courses and transformational retreats, visit knowtheself.com. Let's dive in. Hey, Satya.
Hey,
So I want to ask you a question because I have found that there's something a bit confusing going on in the minds of men in regards to women and women like us, like women who are independent and strong and kind of, seasoned. we know what we want. And I think sometimes like men feel like I'm noticing that men are intimidated often to talk to me, or they are just kind of going through this process where I think, when we get older and we have a divorce or a few relationships, it either makes you stronger or weaker, right? People kind of go through this like, oh, I'm so old now and I'm single and starting over. But you and I have started over a number of times. I've been married twice and been in a few. A lot. I think I have had I feel like I've had 5 marriages or something because I've had long-term relationships in these chunks of time.
Mm-hmm.
And I know you're the same. And we've done a lot of work to kind of understand like why our relationship didn't work, and to move through the like self-hatred that comes with like, oh, I'm a failure, I can't make it work, or oh, why do I keep attracting this same sort of person that is somewhat abusive or in a bad situation that's not conducive to my growth, and then your paths diverge. And I feel a lot of people who are in their 40s are finding themselves single suddenly. Like it's like a phenomena around the world. I was talking to my friend from Montreal, and she said, oh, everyone's single. There are no more married couples in her reality. I was like, wow, that's so interesting. So more and more people are individuating from the coupleness and yet looking for the next level. And I see that as just a natural progression of evolution. Like we've noticed in our lives, like each new relationship is like the next level of growth, and the way that we heal some of the older wounds and the way that we move forward. So I just wanted to speak to the guys who are listening, who are like wondering like, well, I don't know what she wants, because I hear this from men a lot when they're complaining about the woman, like, well, I don't get it. She's so confusing. And like, she says she wants this, and then she does this, and she says she wants freedom, but she's so jealous, or she says they get confused. Mm-hmm. They just get confused. And so I thought, well, let me ask Satya, and maybe we can just riff here, but like, when you were looking for a man, because you were recently single and you just got into this beautiful relationship and you're in the honeymoon phase and you're glowing from it and it looks amazing on you. But what were you looking for in a man, so that the guys listening can kind of hear like, what were some of the quality traits? What was it that you were needing and wanting? How were you wanting to be met by a man?
For me, I think I had always had like pieces of something, and then not like a major piece would be missing. And so I think somewhere in there, I felt like I don't know, maybe I didn't believe it existed, or maybe I didn't deserve it, or maybe and then there were times when I would, they say, oh, make a list of, all these things that you want. And, and then, that will manifest. And that's dangerous, because inevitably you forget something really important, or there's something you already have that you take for granted, so you don't put it on the list. And then the next relationship is like, oh my God, what happened?
I've had that one time. I got very specific in my 20s, and I like had the whole thing like, had to be a Java engineer, had to be European, had to be great as a romantic lover, had to be, intellectually stimulating for me and sociable. My family needed to like him. I wanted someone who understood me intellectually and also spiritually. And I got all of that, and I forgot the age. And when I met, I even wrote, he needed to ride a silver Ducati. And he literally showed up with a silver helmet. And I was like, do you ride a Ducati? He's like, oh, you saw me drive up? And I was like, no. I'm like, are you a Java engineer? He's like, yeah. And I'm like, oh, and he's like, you're kind of freaking me out. Like, how do you know all this about me? I'm like, oh, sorry. Like, I didn't tell him, I wrote it down. And then I was like, wait a second, how old are you? And he was like 24 and I was 28. And I was like, damn, like I didn't put the age, but yeah, I learned the hard way. We shouldn't do that. So obviously you've learned all these things.
Yeah, I did that once too. And I had fantastic communication in my relationships, like all my relationships. But then I was looking for this next level. And I was like, oh, I want somebody I can do music with, and I can and sure enough, like appeared right out of.
You got the musician without the financial stability or something.
But like no communication. Yeah.
No communication. Yeah.
I'd always had like good finances, good communication. I was like, hold on, I'm going to go bang my head against a wall now because I cannot speak to this person. Just help me.
It's so funny.
Yeah. And the age thing, didn't even think about that. Didn't even cross my, and this guy was like way older than me. And I'm like, no, I'm not down for that. Like really in the long haul, it just like, anyway. So anyway, but I mean, okay, what would like, all women say, oh yeah, I want somebody who's, successful and, financially successful, set, able to kind of like, guide the, the way we do things, plan things out,
what's funny for me is that none of the things you've said were ever really on my list. I never wrote financially successful because I've always been like so self-contained. I never thought about it. Like it was something I just never thought about because I wasn't looking for them to be, but now it's on the list,
thank you.
It wasn't on the list.
Thank you for saying
all
that.
My life. Yeah.
Oh my God. No, I love you for saying that because exactly the same with me. Like I never thought about it, never put it on my list. And then I would be looking around like, wait, who are all these other women that have the, and then here I am, like, I mean, I don't know. It's just
supporting your guy.
I know.
Yeah, I know. I've actually like both of us have had men that we have financially supported.
Right. Or in some way, or, and then in all, it's not cut and dry with me because there was some support like from them, but just never in the way that it seemed like I was going on like it would. But yeah, I never thought about it. I never put that on my list. I don't even think I thought that was okay. I thought that a woman who does that is like shallow, and like I actually judged that. I actually think that
I did too.
I think I must have disowned that part of myself, but also like my mother, like growing up, my mom was always like, money doesn't matter, looks don't matter. And so, I would end up, with somebody who like may have had like all these great qualities, but maybe I wasn't even that attracted to them. And maybe like, like financially they were a mess or something like that, and then that ended up really grating on me. So in a way I had to kind of start bringing together all the things that I wouldn't allow myself to want or whatever. But I also think that, okay, so I'm trying to make my list here. So, okay, takes care of himself, has a good body, looks good, which is just like most women are doing that for themselves. So they want like that in somebody else, but I never would allow myself to ask for that either. So that was never a thing for me.
I never allowed that either. It's interesting when you say most women in this, because everything you've said about that, I'm like, no, I've never done that. And that's what I'm wondering, like, did you, at this stage in your life, did you suddenly have a higher bar and said like, okay, I've, recently been divorced and I'm looking for somebody new to share my life with. And like, what did you ask for? Like, how did they, because I know you're drop dead gorgeous and men kind of like follow you around. Like, you're not going to stay single for long. And I remember having these conversations with you. You were like, oh my God, what am I doing? I should just stick it out. Like, why should I get divorced at this stage? And I'm like, you're not happy. You're not feeling met. You're struggling this. And I was trying to support you where you were at, but I felt for years, I mean, you really did everything you could to make the marriage work. It wasn't like you were not trying. Like, I watched you, and you had a child, and you needed to like do what's right for her. And you were like trying to do everything right. And yet at the end of the day, like, to me, it looked like your wings were clipped. Like, you were like confined, and you just needed a bigger expression. And so for whatever reason, I think that relationships do that to us. Like, they expand us or they contract us. And for me, that's why I'm seeing a trend, and this is why I'm bringing it up. And I want to hear from the guys listening if you see the same trend or like what you're looking for. But I feel that we want to connect, we want relationships. But for me, what's more important is I don't want to feel constricted. I don't want to feel squeezed. I don't want to feel pressurized. Like, if the relationship suddenly feels like a cage, or feels like I can't be myself fully, or I'm cutting off some part of me to make the relationship work, then it doesn't feel good. And so I'm just like, I saw you in your marriage, like, oh, suddenly it became like a trap, and you're just like, oh my God. Okay. I'm working. Okay. Forget about this part that I need. Forget about that part that I need. Work on myself, give it to myself. And then it comes to a point where it's like, you're not being met anymore. And it's just obvious that, two people aren't on the same path. And I think that's normal. I think we're going to expect that more and more. Like, maybe we're only supposed to be with people for a couple of years. And some people are lucky and get like, 20, 30, 40 years of marriage, and they're still able to like be in love and make it work and support each other. But
And
maybe not.
I know, right? I mean, because so far, I feel like for a lot of people's experience, and maybe yours and mine has been, like, you have these pieces, but then you don't have like the whole thing. And then the cool thing now is, oh, you can't get all the things you want in another person, so don't try, and don't, or we all need to be individuals. We've been literally fed a program now for what, like 30 years now. Oh, love yourself first, and and then you'll love, then you can be able to love, or be okay on your own, and then you'll be able
And
to
heal all your trauma first before you try and get in a relationship. Like, be perfect, marry yourself first.
You don't need everyone.
I agree with it, but it's
right. And again, yes to all of that. And the reason that had to come out so strong was because we had to swing in the opposite direction, as we always do, to try to heal things to come into balance. Basically, like you and I were talking about in our last episode, like, even in our lives, or with our names, or with like how we're moving, sometimes you have to go, that's just human nature, right? It's the law of physics. Like, you have to swing here, and then you go back to a balance, which is also where we're at as a collective right now, politically and everything else. But for relationships, like, I want to come out and say, like, actually, let's swing back to the center on that one. We actually are more depressed, more lonely, more isolated since all of that began. And people are not happy. And yes, they are like living single, but deep inside of them, they're still wanting this other thing, or they're hanging on to like something or someone that they're getting crumbs from, like in hopes that maybe someday that person might be it. Or they're dating a person over here, and then they have like, other people they're texting, because they're, just in case they don't get everything they want from this person, or they don't feel they have everything in this person, and they don't believe they ever can, so they're just going to settle for that, and they're just going to, but now that I've had these different experiences, I think what happened is, because I had come from a lot of imbalance in different ways, I finally got to the point where I had all the imbalances and swung in all the different directions in all the ways.
Yeah.
So now it's going to like converge in the center in this perfect little orb. And I feel like that's what happened. Now, hopefully for some other people, they don't have to do all of that. And that's fantastic. But the way I was raised and everything, this is how it had to happen. So I feel like I was in a space where I was finally like, okay, I've always been this very deep, soulful, spiritual person, in relationships, and had, these like artistic musical connections or whatever. And then I would forsake a part of myself for, the other things, or like you're saying, the expansion and contraction. So I want both. So I finally got to a point where it's like, oh, it's not an either or. I want the containership, and I want to feel taken, contained, kept, held, owned in a way. And of course, I'm not talking about own in the way of, like,
Yeah.
abuse, or the way things were, but contained in such a way that I'm allowed to completely expand. And with somebody that isn't afraid of my expansion and is also very free themselves. And so we can completely expand together, or, aside each other and together, without losing any of the containership, or without losing any of that. So that is, I think, a very, not an easy thing. I mean, whoever found that easily, like,
No, I don't know anyone who's found that easily.
we should
I know.
create an
But if you're
offering.
listening and you have, please contact us, because we want
Please
to interview
contact
you.
us. Yeah, because
But no, I don't know anyone who actually really lives like that. Maybe some of the people like Ken and his wife at the age that they're in the golden years after 52 years of marriage, have finally discovered their freedom in their togetherness, and they're safe, and it comes, and maybe that's because they went through so much. I don't know. Like, I don't know if I have the capacity or the patience to push through, and we don't have the world right now that allows that. I find in relationships that I kind of give up too much of my freedom. I give up. Nobody asked me to. I do it. I do it because, like you, I want to feel contained in some way. Like, I like the containership of a relationship. It sort of takes off the feeling of, I think it blocks some of the overt sexual energy that comes at me throughout my day. And so when I'm in a relationship, I prefer to be, so I can focus on my work, so I can focus on other things. So I don't have the drama of like the male pursuit on me.
right.
It's weird. And I've really had to recognize that. I'm like, oh, actually, I'm scared to be single, because that means I have to deal with this every day. Like when you say you have a boyfriend or you're married, it just sort of stops. It stops a lot of it. A lot of it.
When I had the big rock on my finger, when I was, doing finances with big, powerful, wealthy men, like it was somehow just a relief to me. I'm like, okay, I don't have to say anything. I don't have to.
Yeah, they just know. And then if they're engaging with you, it's all dangerous and nasty stuff. Like they're doing it to play with fire, right? And
right.
I guess for me, it's like, I just love being able to relate to men, especially in business, without needing all of the sexual innuendos and this and that. So it was just easy for me to be like, hey, I'm in a relationship, like, knock it off. Like, what are you doing? And I could speak to it. It gave me a sense of power, or, I don't know, an excuse, maybe sometimes even. And now I feel like, I don't know, like I need to be able to own that. In the last few years, I feel like I have found a way to own it by being single, even. And I think it's to age also, like I'm at this stage where it's like, okay, I'm no longer in my 30s or 20s, 30s, 40s. So I can kind of hold it differently, right? Like I can hold it within myself. I'm not needing to like lean in on the relationship and be like, okay, no, you have to protect me from all this. Like I can do it alone. And I like that feeling, but it's just, yeah, it's interesting to see like how we're evolving in this way. Because I definitely am. I know you are. I'm sure our listeners are.
Yeah. And I think, I think we have had to disown a part of ourselves, as, I think a lot of people right now, in that way of, it's, I'm fine alone, or it's okay to be alone. And it is, of course, and I think if you really embody that and you really know that, then it kind of frees you up to just, actually, I do want to just, I think I think the balance is, you know what, it's okay if you're looking for the love of your life. It's okay if you're still wanting that sacred partnership and you still want to go for that. Men want it just as much as women. They are
Yeah.
so lonely, and they need the like affection and love, and they fall in love so easily. Men do, like even easier than women, and they are terrified and scared most of the time. And women, I think, are also that way. But I think that a lot of people have given up, and so they date around, and they text like 10 people at a time. And I think because they have actually given up. But what happens is that then there's all this leakiness, in the container of what your soul is really desiring. And you absolutely will never find it if you're doing that, if you're like leaking in that way. Do you know what I mean? Like you have
Yeah. What do you
that's
think like the top 5 like traits were for you to look at in terms of that kind of union?
well, for me, first of all, I mean, we have to slow down and back up on that, because for me it was just this knowing and this faith, like I was going to have it, and there's no doubt. And in fact, like it was almost as if I already had it, and
Mhm.
and I just knew it.
So it
And
was all like a sensory experience for you.
I
Like, what does
knew
it
that
feel like? What does
I
it
knew
feel
that
like in all
person was,
these areas?
yeah, I knew I was gonna have that. And so I didn't want to mess around with any little other smaller things or like crumbs. That it's like, oh no, if I'm not, if I meet a guy and he's not just literally like, like, then why would I waste my time, like to wait a year for that person to come around? Like some women do that. I've never done that, but I, and those are the single people. And that's why I'm never single, because I try. I have no problem being alone, no problem being independent, no problem, none of that. Like, and maybe that's the other thing, is that like I really don't. And and then
And maybe some of it comes down to just like yes, socializing and personal needs and time together, time apart. Like I find I'm really introverted. Like if I don't get my 2 hours alone a day, like alone, without the phone, without the computer, like for me,
Mhm.
um, I'm not very nice. Like I take it out on the people in my physical space. And I don't like that about me. I notice I do it, but it's just like, wow, if I need to make sure I have that.
Well, and I think too, the reasons we end up falling in love with people or finding that person, it's often a very unconscious, mysterious thing that comes from usually our wounds as children, and all of the bullshit we had with our parents, or good stuff.
Yeah.
So I mean, some people I've met, I'm like, God, they're so boring, and maybe they just had it too good with their parents, or some way. So they need to find somebody else who had it like too good, so they can just like thrive together. But so I for me, like part of the faith and part of my inner calling was more or less just um you know uh, there is a totality that is me, and I'm going to accept all that is me, good, bad, ugly, weird, narcissistic, whatever it is, all of the different things, or neuroticism, I mean, but just like all of it, and let that be okay, and still say I'm lovable. And there is somebody who like desires all of those things, all the parts of me, and would just like love me, and needs all that I am. And there's somebody out there that I need all that they are, in this unexplainable way. So I didn't put any like
I love
specific on
that.
it.
Mhm.
And I really think that's how I was ultimately able to, because that's the first time I've ever been able to say that in that way, even remotely close to that. And that's how this miracle happened. And it's just crazy, because yeah, on the surface, he's got all the things that, like, well, I mean, I would think like the typical woman would
Yeah,
want,
checks the boxes.
like good communicator, positive, fun, sexy, sexual, like, all the levels, good looking, takes care of himself, just all of those things. Like, that's just, to me, like just basic stuff, right? But it's so much more than that. It's like the little things. It's like moving through your day, and or
It's
when
the little things. For me, it's the little things.
yeah, or when I screw up, or I'm not feeling good about myself, like having somebody who's like, that's great, that's amazing what you just did, or that's like, because I've been in the past, I've been with a lot of like very critical people, or and just to be able to lift each other up, and kindness, like being kind with each other, but yet also having like a lot of self-worth. Like, you're not going to let yourself be like shit on in any way, but you're also like, hey, this is, but just always kind and accepting toward the, so I think what I'm getting at is it's being in the center of two extremes and having both. So I would say
I love what you said.
I want to be completely free, but I want to be like, we're completely independent, but we're completely codependent and interdependent. And that's a beautiful thing. Like, I want it all. I'm done with like, the other stuff doesn't work for me. Like having this thing over here or that thing over there, or yeah.
I love that you leaned into the trust and the knowing that this is your birthright to have, and just allowing it to be, and to find you and magnetize towards you. Because I do remember how it all unfolded, and it did feel like this magical fairy tale, and like, wow, you're just this master manifester. You told me about it, you were feeling into it, and then suddenly it was just like right there, like a dream. And now you get to like live your dream. And I think that's exactly how it works. And I think we get better as we get older into learning how we do instantly manifest, and how we need to control our thoughts, and how we need to clarify the intention and get to the core part that's the most important, or really just sit with the feelings and sensations of already having it, so that it does come in alignment, and you can be magically surprised and taken on that ride, and not have to like navigate it and try to control it in some way.
Yeah. And the people who know me, like you're saying, like would definitely say like, wow, she thinks of something and then it just like happens.
Yes. I see you do that again and again. And so I actually tell you what to think about for me sometimes, because you're so good at it. I'm like, can you add this on the list for the day?
Oh my gosh, it's so good. Yeah, and it's it's lovely to be seen for that, because I would almost like be afraid to like really admit that. But yeah, since I was a little girl, or my whole life has been that way. I mean, even just like getting out of my hometown, where it's like everyone else like stays there forever, and
because you're this
3 kids,
Arcturian goddess. You're not a Bakersfield homie, even though you are like.
But I think that in order to, I think one of the keys with all that is that you have to be it yourself. Like, if I have always been I like radical honesty with myself, like the good, the bad, the ugly, and trying to have that radical communication with everyone I meet, and that requires just constantly looking at my shadow, or looking at, and so I think if you can fully be yourself in any given moment or time or decade, or then it becomes quite easy to magnetize or attract that thing, because you are authentic. And there's nothing that you're not seeing. There's nothing that you're blind to. Mm-hmm. And so the next thing can see you very easily. And I think everyone is looking for that ultimately.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for sharing your magical process of manifesting dreamlike reality states. Great. Yes, thank you, my dear. And until next time. To learn more about our life-enhancing courses and transformational retreats, visit knowtheself.com.